Hey everyone, it's Amanda, and I have a nonfiction book review for you today. The book in question is The Long Walk by Brian Castner, a story of war and the life that follows. And it is an own voice account of his time being deployed overseas as a bomb technician. So he is a member of the Air Force, I believe is the branch that he is specifically in, but the bomb disposal group that he is part of is multidisciplinary, so multi-branch. So he's not just the Air Force, but is also the Army that he mentions specifically. And it's one of those stories that when I first read it, it's obviously not written for me. It's not written for a mid-30s woman. I guess I'm not the audience they thought would be reading this, but I loved this. It was one of the best modern war books that I have read, and not because it talked about the war and the strategy, but it talked about the physical toll that we're paying. And several points really made an impact for me. And he talks not just about his time there, but how he had to assimilate back into society and how hard of a transition it was when you're away, your life is on hold. You are deployed, you're doing your job, and you're doing your duty as an American. And he forgot that everyone else's life is on hold. And it's not necessarily that he forgot, but he didn't realize, when you have children, that they may be scared of you when you get home. And I talked a lot about this particular book with some of my coworkers who are veterans. One in particular, I asked several questions about his assimilation. When he came back, he deployed multiple times over the course of, I think it was a decade. And he that was one of the things that he said was the hardest, was the idea that there's inside jokes, there's all these little things that make you realize the time that you gave up. And it really is sort of amplified in this book because he talks about how, for the first time, war isn't as personal as it used to be. Before, it used to be trench warfare or hand-to-hand, or more you face your enemy. And because of that, people didn't survive a lot of the things that happened. And now we have better technology in both the killing aspect and in the saving aspect, because people will survive a blast in a Humvee, for example, is the example that he gave that he experienced. And he said, you count your digits, make sure you have your fingers and toes, oh, I'm fine. But it doesn't take into account all of the unseen damage that you go through on a daily basis. And the part about this book that really sort of hit home for me and made me incredibly sad, but also I'm glad I read it, was the stress factor. And he talks about post-traumatic stress disorder a lot and how he didn't want to call it that. And he calls it his crazy, and that he can feel it building, and it's this pressure that sort of never gets released. And it's the actions that don't seem abnormal in the moment, but looking back he realizes how out of place they are because he's not in wartime anymore. And he talked about the birth of a child, the most recent one since he had stopped being in the military. And he decided, they're vulnerable and I'm going to protect them. So while the wife was sleeping, he got his gun and waited at the top of the stairs because he knew that enemies would have to be in a narrow corridor and would limit the number that could come up and harm their child. And little things in the shift of thinking that shows the stress that really war creates. He also talks about choosing the order that people die and the stress of that, the weight of that puts on a person. And he talks about being in Humvee. They were on a mission. They had suspicious activity, potential bomb. They were going to disarm. They got separated from their escort, so it's just them. And they get stalled in traffic, and they all start to panic. And the timer starts to count down, and it's we have 30 seconds. We can't be we have to get moving. We're going to be trapped. We're sitting ducks. And he goes on and he does this sort of internal countdown, and he starts flipping the safety on his rifle. Safe, single, auto, single, safe, single, auto, single, safe, back and forth. And then he counts down again in 20 seconds. And then safe, single, auto, single, safe, single, auto, single, safe, 20 seconds, 10 seconds, over and over, safe, single, auto, single, safe. And he's, in doing this action, he's looking at the people around him, girl in the glasses, guy with a red coat, woman with a shirt, and he he says, I'm choosing the order that people will die when we're attacked. And the weight of those words, and that he still has that. He then mirrors another example of being in line, and that he tries to alter the times that he shops. He goes with other buddies who have similar experiences, and they marvel at one another about their ability to handle mundane, everyday tasks like standing in line, and the little things that just people don't realize unless your life has been in danger. Someone's upset about a coupon, and someone doesn't have this ready, and then the lady's writing a check, and everybody's getting upset, and they've actually seen tragedy and had serious moments where they question whether they were going to survive, and all they feel is anger, that these are the big things that you have to worry about. My friend's died, and that they'll be in line again, and he'll start the countdown. I'm standing still too long. I'm waiting. I'm an easy target. I've been here too long, because that mechanism of anxiety never got turned off, and so he starts picking out people in the line in the same way that he did in an actual combat situation. And this has been one of the best accounts, I think, of post-traumatic stress disorder that I've ever read, and the human toll that not just on the individuals who've experienced war, but on their families, because he talks about a conversation that he had with his wife. His wife, her father was a veteran, and she asked her mother, she asked advice for what should I do when he comes home? How can I help make this easier? And she's like, honey, your husband's not coming home. You just don't know it yet. And the idea that the person you were before you had these experiences that literally changed your life, that person doesn't exist, and the idea of them becomes a resentment, and the fact people are comparing you to this person that you're not any longer, or you compare yourself to the person that you used to be, and you miss the naivety, and you miss the not having nightmares, and you miss being able to do simple tasks without anxiety creeping up on you and you having to run off the fear, run off the fumes and the pressure, only to have it build again immediately. And the personal account for this novel was something that I just wasn't expecting. This wasn't written for me. This isn't written for a 30-something woman. This book wasn't written for me, and there's places that becomes very obvious where he's using very heavy sort of dude speak where he's talking to his brothers, as he calls them, and using the same terminology that they would have used for one another. So it's not really meant for me, but I'm really glad that I read it. And I think the takeaway that I have from this is just that we make mental illness in our country such a stigma. And we make traumatic events something that someone should bottle up and not talk about, because that's something that he was afraid of. He was afraid of seeing a shrink. He was afraid of seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist. And why? Why should he have that fear? Why should he be worried about the opinions of others? And that's sad. And I really liked this, and I think it's got pretty high ratings on Amazon, and I'm not sure about Goodreads as well. It doesn't have very many, I think, on either of them. But this is a book, if you want to learn more, not just about war, and the actual mechanics, where he talks about how they're supposed to get things done and when they put things off and how they get from different locations. But it's also little gems along that way where he's talking about his brothers, and he's talking about their loss, and he's talking about this friend who taught him something that he still keeps kind of in his mind, and he can hear their voice egging him on. And he says sometimes the easy way isn't always the best. And an analogy that he uses is the training that they had, and there was a path that was paved, but there was also a sand path, and the sand was hell hard. It was running through sand uphill, and it made it harder, but it also made him stronger. And he tried to cheat. He tried to be off the path, and the going phrase was, don't be afraid to put your foot in the sand, and do it the hard way if you need to get you there and make yourself stronger. And I think that theme carried through this book of what you give up and what makes you stronger and how you move on, and how he has dealt with these tragedies and how he's dealt with these experiences and where he is in his life now. And I can't recommend this enough. If you like nonfiction military accounts, this is probably one of the better ones I've read that's not sort of, huge award-winning book. I hope this wins some sort of award, but I don't know if it will, and especially because it's more recent wars. Because he talks about the people too, and how different soldiers dealt with the local population differently, and how that can get to you too. And it just, everything about this was great. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you do too. If you have read this, let me know, or if you have anything sort of own voice or personal account like this that's not just a play-by-play by the action, but actually what happened to them when they came back and how they assimilated all these events. And it was sort of in a flashback style, this went, which is why it was so relevant when you're paused in a combat zone, and how you're counting down and how you're going to get out, because you have a family and you're in line at the supermarket and you still have that same fight or flight response. I love this, and I hope you do too. If you have read this or something similar, please let me know in the comments below, and I look forward to hearing from you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye!